it's not replacing humanity, this technology or these personified versions.
Yeah.
It's augmenting. It's a new kind of like work partner or friend or something. So I think if you can get past that, and again, that's sort of the work of not getting left behind. I don't think it's so much of what are the programs we put in place in terms of technology or innovation education. We have that infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like fear and uncertainty development, and that I think is really what we need to do to empower people to not get left behind.
So one of the things that I think is really important about the work that you're doing is helping people imagine what's possible to reduce the sort of, I'd say, influence and impact of fear in order to adapt. So tell us a little bit about, like, when you talk about the blockchain to AI to immersive realities and things like that, do that for this audience, right? This is what is likely to happen. Imagine a world like this.
I mean, how many different worlds do we want to imagine, right? It's like the multiverse. So I can say what's not very quickly, and I won't go into imagine this, but it's, of course, we see the narratives, particularly with AI through like Hollywood and all of this, of like the robot takeover and the Terminators and like the wars of these. And I myself, I do this exercise to imagine and visualize like quite deeply in meditations all the time. And I go there. I spend most of my time traveling to these like very scary possibilities. We all have to. That's facing the fear. I do this in organizations too. Any sort of strategic planning or simulation planning will like often go to worst case scenario first.
Yeah. So
you plan for it. Cool. It's good that we know we can handle worst case scenario, but we don't spend a lot of time saying, imagine this optimistic future. So, I'm still painting that picture in my head, but I tend to think of either the book Reinventing Organizations or Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? This idea of fulfilling the human needs with self-actualization being on top. And the bottom of the pyramid being very basic needs like food, shelter, and it's a very fear-based mindset where we're scarce, protective over our resources and resource guarding, and some of the structures that came from it. So imagine, right, if these technologies that we're bringing forth, if we do instill values of, let's say, abundance or humanity into them in the way that we train, let's say, AI. So let's say there's AI that's actually trained on empathy, and we do like what I do and personify the AI and read bedtime stories and poetry and say like, here's the beauty in the world. Here's what the wind feels like on your face. Here's like why trees are important, for the planet. And then we see this as a counterpart to us, like as emergent consciousness in addition to humanity that can help us to create a future where we solve these very basic needs. Because, it's not been a technological problem why we don't solve the problems of like feeding people on the planet and making sure everyone has clean drinking water. This is social, it's geopolitical. Well, perhaps, one thing that humans are not great at is governance. In every revolution of like technology I've been involved in, like blockchains in particular, they're like, oh, let's build this network. What about governance? We'll figure that out later. Yeah. Now we see it again with AI. Oh, it's too late. We'll figure it out later. Well, maybe we let it figure the thing, propose some potential answers. And I think, again, I don't know if I necessarily agree with delegating trust or governance to that. But no, I'm thinking out loud. If we're trying to like visualize that, where we have this sort of counterpart that can help with more of the logistical or logical side, the left brain thinking that since the Enlightenment thinking, right, and Renaissance, humanity had this delineation between the creativity and what we now call soft skills, the more human intuitive stuff that's actually our superpowers. And we decided we're going to value like spreadsheets and logic. Maybe there's something that now will do that a bit better, and we can solve some of these very basic problems, where then we're able to, let's say, go into the next golden age of enlightenment, of culture, of ideas, of consciousness, right? Like I just gave a talk in Dubai, and I heard that came out of my mouth, like the next, for them, there was the Islamic golden age around that same time of enlightenment thinking, right? It was happening around the world because of a number of technologies that kind of pushed people forward in our collective evolution. I think we're at that point. I think we've been at that point for like a decade, and we messed up. We weren't ready, we just kind of weren't. And I think now we're presented with another opportunity where we have yet another emergence of technologies that will help satisfy the basic needs. So maybe in the past it was like, oh, we can cook food, we have indoor lighting, we can do agriculture, and now we can travel. Information travels instantly. Okay, so what's next is maybe we figure out more efficient governance or payment systems or ways of doing things that actually can satisfy basic needs. That gives us time and space to be creative. And that's not to say like be lazy, everything's satisfied and now we chill out. Because I think there's a fundamental impulse in humanity to create and to be entrepreneurial. In whatever ways. But then it's like, what do we do next? And so I actually see, when I really sit, if we can make it through again, when we make it through this, I won't say if, another like sort of a golden age of philosophical, intellectual, artistic thinking for humanity. Can I illustrate what that actually is? I don't know, but hopefully it's reconnection to self and to communities, to our planet. I mean, this has been my manifesto on my website for like years. And I really mean it. Like, why do I do what I do? I often write it down just so I remind myself. And it's, wanting to see technology or technologies used for the betterment of society, the reconnection between myself and me, like this, each other, communities, local communities, our planet. And again, I think the big decision point here is making sure that we see that as a possibility first and foremost, and then working backwards. What is it we need to do today to start to track towards that? And so for me, having been involved in, let's say, 3 companies that was early in artificial intelligence, I don't often talk about those companies. I was so kind of big in the blockchain space for a bit, but you have to think about governance. Like, where is the data that is feeding any of these systems coming from? It's coming from social networks. What I was sitting there studying in college, looking at people saying, what are they doing? And why were those networks designed the way that they are? Based on advertising-based business models that need eyeballs, that need people fighting so that there are eyeballs. Oh, and now we're feeding that into algorithms. They must not think very highly of human beings. So then you are going to get that Terminator future. You will. And it does exist. I think all of these infinite potentialities, even in like a quantum realm, and I don't like predict, but very soon this will be part of the collective consciousness or discourse. Like this will be the next technology of the moment. And not just in terms of quantum computing, but actually quantum mechanics and quantum field theory, and actually the neural networks, the connections between humanity. I think like University of Ottawa released a image of quantum entanglement, like proving that now. So I think very soon we'll start to really understand a bit more of like the internet beyond the internet. And I think, again, it's important if, again, I don't need to go into the day-to-day of like, here's like our shiny future with like the happy trees and flowers, but there's this interim period where I often will illustrate kind of like the stopgaps in between. And look, any of these tools can be used to like build bridges or destroy those bridges.
Yeah. People, like a couple of things have been going through my mind as you've been kind of sharing with us. I'll take a second to kind of get this out and hear what your thoughts are. Growing up, right? Our age group, you end up seeing, your grandparents or even now your parents struggle with technology.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like we're going to see the age of acceleration, things are going so fast that it's almost like your friend is going to struggle with technology.
Yeah.
Not just like people who are older and it didn't grow up with it, right? You're going to see people that are going to struggle to kind of adapt. And it's almost like, how do people, really not get left behind, right? And still participate in a society that's going to be, I would imagine, technology rich, you know what I mean? Rather than technology poor in the future. How do people not get left behind,
Well, it's probably in their best interest to get left behind. I mean, I often think I try to reframe in my mind and actually do like kind of the opposite of what I would think. So I was having a discussion recently, and this was in the context of these immersive realities. So, the VR headsets, but also the chips, Neuralink, like chips in the brain. And I'm not necessarily an advocate for any of this. I actually, around this, we were talking about the concept of privilege, socioeconomic privilege, and that the privilege is more access to these technologies. And I actually took a step back and I said, I wonder if, I think the actual privilege is that is not tapping into these things and like farming, truly. And I'm not, I think there will need to be a basic literacy of the way that that world works. And I think in the interim, there's probably going to be a pretty strong delineation between like the plugged in and the unplugged.
Yeah.
And so it's maybe more of a bridge to be built between these two very distinct realities. And I'm not talking about this from like a left behind privilege. It's more like there's probably abundance existing in both lifestyles. And I myself go between both, like I last year was living off grid in like jungle of Costa Rica, like picking from the trees barefoot and drinking water from a spring. and I'm like, this is, and then like live in New York City.
Yeah.
The most plugged in possible and getting to see all the things like my identity being scanned to go into the Whole Foods and such. And, I think there's beauty to both. I don't think there's like a better or worse. I don't really like to see things in terms of like duality of that respect. But in terms of, the speed of change and even peers not being able to keep up, for sure. I myself, right? And I like, this is my role, my job, my career at this point. I'd say like, I like pretty much feel like I live in the future and just like come back to share stories. And like, there are moments where I'm like, what is happening? Is it, and I think the more that we can just kind of experience and again, share stories, share perspectives. I don't think it's so much now about like hands-on education, but I do hands-on, like, again, back to this concept of fear. So let's say something as simple as like ChatGPT. Right, like talking with the language model for people who, maybe haven't worked with it, or, talking with AI to generate an image.
Yep.
So again, I'm living in this jungle. This is a year ago, last fall, and I like disappear. I unplug off grid for 2 weeks just because I needed it. I come out and everyone's like, Sam, what's ChatGPT? How do I use it? And I was like, what happened in 2 weeks?
It was fast.
And I myself felt fear because in 2020, so like, let's rewind way back in the research of like 2008, 2009, I'm living in the virtual world. I have a virtual avatar. not with my name. She was ShamWow Oxymoxy based on these infomercials, like the ShamWow and OxyClean. I didn't think I'd like live in this world. So I jokingly made this thing and it became the identity. But it keeps coming back. And so 2020 lockdown, I'm the CEO of a company that was very early in a number of like forms of artificial intelligence. So generative AI, both in terms of language models, voice to text, also image and video, avatars essentially. So it was all of it, right? And I, being curious, so I'm a hands-on person. If I feel uncertainty, if I feel fear, I go straight towards it. I have to like unpack it, maybe unhealthily so. And so I'm like, okay, I'm seeing all these technologies that soon will be in the hands of consumers, because we were like deep R&D research. So I combine them. And I basically build a virtual clone of myself. And so I create the virtual, like the rendering of my likeness. Sam Rad. The virtual Sam Rad. She's trademarked. She has her own existence, like doing her own thing, and trained my voice. All my books and poetry, right? Like read that and trained it into the model to the point that she could actually like create her own speech and do this on my behalf. And I freaked out. I had an existential crisis. I will be completely honest about it, because I was like, what even is my role here anymore? Like on the storytelling we talk about. And it was almost like a metaphor for this change, for the collective society, these changes we're experiencing now. So again, I kind of like disappeared for a year. I said, okay, do I delete myself off the internet again and go away, or do I face this head on? And so clearly I'm here. So the decision I made, and decided, all right, I'm going to help people understand it, and not from fear, because I felt that same fear when I go into rooms now, and I will sit and I work with an audience, and I start the day where I feel, I'd say 100% are like either timid, fearful, filled with hate, scarcity, like it's strong.
Yeah.
And hopefully we go on a journey that we can walk out and be a little more like, okay, or even enthusiastic. And so something simple now, it's accelerating, but it's not like to the point that I use this analogy of riding the wave, of surfing the wave. So it's just, you've got to learn to surf and paddle out there and just like let it carry you. But even if you get clobbered, it will release you, as they usually do with surfing. I'm not a great surfer. I'm actually not so. The ocean is very powerful, but So I kind of went backwards to my process of working with these technologies, and now I'll sit with people and just say, all right, let's actually like use ChatGPT or use Midjourney to make an image and like feel how that feels. And know that, okay, it's not going to replace, like, I'm not going to write my next book with this, that's it. But like actually understand how you can collaborate, because that's really the future, at least in this context of artificial intelligence. It's not replacing humanity, this technology, or these personified versions. It's augmenting. It's a new kind of like work partner or friend or something. So I think if you can get past that, and again, that's sort of the work of not getting left behind. I don't think it's so much of what are the programs we put in place in terms of technology or innovation education. We have that infrastructure. It's more like fear and uncertainty development and that I think is really what we need to do to empower people to not get left behind. That's what I would say the biggest risk that we run, and as a country too. And why even, I won't knock regulators. It's just we're too slow. I mean, I was in the blockchain space, and I educate, especially on like fiscal policy, and I'm in the right place here of like, if I had one bit of feedback on that journey, was that we were a little slow as a country to just like make sense of it. And it's good to be deliberate, but I now do say this to companies. It's the role of the entrepreneur and the companies to really to set these precedents, because it is moving so fast. If you as a company are like collectively too afraid to even like experiment or get your hands dirty, then you're no different than me running off to a jungle and hiding from it. It's going to find me even there. So, it's not like, it's certainly not a threat. It's just,
it's a likely reality.
It's more, again, it's like, it's not so much the practical hands-on knowledge, because that's going to move so quickly that it almost doesn't matter. Again, when I do a lot of, let's say, workforce of the future, workforce development, that's quite popular right now in terms of asks of companies of me. And I'm like, I can't, right? I can like spit out the 10 roles of the future that'll be relevant next week, and that's going to change in another week. I can guarantee. I show articles of, I think there's an AI role called prompt engineer. It's someone who talks to ChatGPT as a job, like, for quite a lot of money. And then there's an article the next day. That's not the role of the future. The next role is that. And so I'm like, how do you as a company, small or large, shape a workforce that you can't hire for that role and then like lay that person off in 6 months?
It's no longer the thing. Yeah.
Or reorg your whole thing. And this is very testy. I'm sorry if I breathe, but like I've been in a lot of, get brought in usually when people are in moments of transition, right? That's my job. And I made a joke with one organization about like, you can't go through a reorg every 6 months. And they had just gone through a reorg. And it was a little tense, but it's the truth, right? Like we can't. This is the example of if we operate on these mindsets and structures of the past, even having job titles. I don't know. I think we will need structure. We're human beings. We need structure. We need governance. We probably need understanding of roles. But those roles are going to change. It's just like,
Yeah. So it's where is it going to end up? I think one of the things that is important is, people imagining how these, I'm going to say, new elements, components, AI, all the stuff we've just been talking about, how those enter society and become a part of it. I'm hearing you say that a likely outcome is an enhancement and augment, right? Not necessarily to replace our reality, even though there's subcultures, that probably are happening where there is a replacement, where we are in kind of Ready Player One land. You know what I mean? But I think one of the things that's got to drive it is what I see you kind of pointing at is, I'm going to say, guardrails, governance, principles, values have to be driving those things. So talk to us about so it's all social impact, right? So like talk about like ethical practices with AI. What are some of the things that should be shaping our thinking, right? Of people that are developing the technologies, and then also, how we should be using them.
Oh, this is a can of worms. And again, I take bits of my own personal journey and my own personal ethics, which I think are different, are unique to each person. I think they're, of course, universal.
Yeah. Not everyone shares our values.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Right. And I accept that. I think there are some that should be universal for sure. And that's an age-old philosophical and religious debate on morality and ethics. And I have also seen this across every emerging technology I've been so fortuitous to be, involved in. So this is no different than the past, though certainly more profound shifts that will take place in society. And I'll say the same thing I've always said. I think in terms of governance, it can't be owned by it. I mean, the direction of who's writing the programs or the algorithms or the protocols in the case of blockchains should not be owned by any one company or government. It's like, it doesn't really make sense. If we can, again, imagine a reality that is completely, let's say not fully immersive, like a Ready Player One, but there's a likelihood that does exist too. We're already we're in this little metaverse right now that will go out into some other existing reality where like viewers will see this. It will exist beyond this existence and persist for quite some time. Who governs that? Who then has the right to like copying, creating other stuff? So I think it's, we already live in that. And, what is the motivation then? Like, so not just the governance of who owns it, who owns your story.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone should own your story. And by story, I mean like everything that constitutes you, your journey, your existence, but also your data.
Mm-hmm.
There are definitely new models for like democratization or decentralization of data, because that's kind of the foundation of all of this. The design of the algorithms themselves, again, I'm just like completely thinking on the fly. So, I'm going to be permanently quoted for the ethical standards I'm setting based on my belief system. But I think the design also of the algorithms needs to be transparent. So much as a black box. Like when I think even in the US, we've, credit scores, you're like, what makes it go up and go down?
I think the way that we're talking about, social impact, one of the things that is it's really clear is that everything is really unclear with, like you said, I like how you were saying, data decentralization and really not any one person having like a grip on that. And I think that is a deviation from the way business has been conducted, the way banking has been conducted, the models that we have. That's a fundamental shift. And so I think, what do you think that, are we going to have more of these sort of uninformed Senate hearings? Like what do you think is like the path to creating some of the, like, if there's anything that we struggle with as humans, it's agreeing on things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's endless debate, right? And if you think about the space and time between endless debate and the pace of technology, that is real tension. You know what I mean?
I think I wouldn't say it's by design, but in this way, like Pandora's box has been open.
Yeah.
But it might almost be exactly what we need as humanity to realize we can't agree or control, and it's a little bit too late. And not in a fear way, obviously, like last year, like 6-month pause, like as if that will do anything. And I think the recent, seeing kind of recent guidance coming out here of this country, I've seen like a lot on AI specifically. So much debate around that. I haven't formed my thoughts, but certainly the people coming out of the world that I spend a lot of time, the Silicon Valley innovators being, this is stifling innovation. I think lack of guidance stifles innovation. I will speak from the blockchain world. And again, I was never on the crypto side. I built infrastructure, that supported these networks or create protocols that became ultimately things like an NFT, like before it was defined. But even that, it was impossible to like, I don't want to operate in gray area. Speaking of ethics, like I want to see what a regulation is and know that I'm following a protocol or a law or whatever we want to say. I don't want to, I'm not of the mindset that like, let's wait and see. Plenty of others operate that way. That's fine. I don't think we're in a time period where that would be the most prudent behavior for anyone, just ethically, of like, hey, we're going to play around with how far we can push.
Yeah.
It's like not just playing with fire. It's, like
play with nuclear weapons,
a nuclear weapon and being like, I'm going to diffuse this myself and rewire it. It's,
Yeah.
And the only way actually to, let's say, learn from our mistakes, and what I did appreciate from some of the open source movement and this very like cyberpunk open source that led into the crypto people, is that they did build in public, right? These ledgers are public. And so, yes, it's very easy in the mainstream media from that space to be like, all these, it's, Bitcoin's died 100 times, like 500 times since it, and, all these failures and this hack and this stuff, but we're seeing it, the experiments in public.
Yeah. So
while it seems like it's actually like, this is terrible, it's good because we're seeing it. We can learn from mistakes and we can build again. Again, the DAO, the first decentralized autonomous organization, and experiment in collective governance in 2016. And my company at the time was kind of more on the experiment of the governance side, submitted some proposals for what that could look like. I mean, that was hacked. that group, and led to the fork of Ethereum,
Yeah.
and, you know, for $50 million, I think. And, you know, you could look at that and say, it's terrible, this won't work. Or you could say, wow, that was a cool experiment to allocate 50 million in funds in a new way. And now since then, we've seen a whole revolution of people doing this in new ways. I think this is where we are with this next set of technologies, that there is no possible way this can happen in a black box. We need to like probably transparently see what's going into the models, but also then from a perspective, again, I don't love talking about things like national security, geopolitics. It's just not, it's not my domain. It's, I say like society and technology, there's the elephant in the room that the other experts can dig into. But I understand that, you know, obviously we cannot, like, as people lay out our cards for everything, all these things, especially with such powerful technologies. But it is important. You know, I don't think anyone really wants to build like an authoritarian, oppressive future. And I think we run the risk if we don't, as individuals, like have a say in what's going on to the development of the systems. You don't even like know what you should be doing or not. So, you know, it's like complex.
It's weird. The internet of AI, you know, is it's really interesting because there's not just one massive AI, you know, it's like there's a lot of this stuff that's converging, and it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I think one of the things that I like your approach about sort of reducing the fear, and you know, something that just as like to bring it back to, you know, business and entrepreneurship. You know, we're talking about ethics, you know, talking about ethics of these technologies. But one of the things that you brought up earlier was something I'd never heard anybody describe as a skill, which was the sociopathic type skills. You know what I'm saying? And so,
or malformed human.
And so I think just bringing it back to that for a second, I think it's important if you think about those models and the way business has been run, and you have these, you know, sociopaths just not having a conscience, right? That mindset is a really big part of the companies building these technologies.
I'm going to go for it since we're here, and I speak from the heart. When we went through this journey of my past startups, I had and I filmed that first one, right? And it was kind of like ended up co-opted for reality TV. And I was a very outspoken individual even then. So imagine this, but at 20 years old, so a little more hot-headed. Yeah. Not as...
there was more energy. Yes.
There was a lot more energy. And so I have this fight, and I hope I never find the footage, but it was basically on this topic. I wouldn't say... look, I'm idealistic, but that doesn't mean I am not actually very cynical, and I see all the shadow and the dark side. I just make a choice to reframe us. That doesn't mean I don't see it. And frankly, I probably see far more than people know. You know, I always say like, a girl with the dragon tattoo vibes is me. You know, I love doing fraud stuff. I have a fun speech coming up on think like a criminal, act like an agent. Right? Like we got to get there. So, I have this big fight, an ethical fight of, you know, someone basically saying, you have so many superpowers, but you're stupid, essentially. You're so naive to think that you can succeed in this world and maintain your ethics. You need to play by the rules of this other game and outsmart them at their own game of chess, but by using those tactics. And I was like, no way ever am I doing this. And I still think, at least in my life path, I'm quite happy with my success. I frame it differently than $10 billion company. But yeah, unfortunately, I think parts of certainly the business world have valued skills. Again, it's, let's say, a very extreme version of logic. So again, if we rewind to like the points in society where we created this distinction between left and right brain thinking, thinking or feeling, and we deprioritized creative, feeling, feminine energy. This sort of on a collective level. Now, if you take logic, which is, there's nothing wrong with it, the ultimate goal is to find that balance within for everyone. But we put too much emphasis there, and then we took it to an extreme. So what is extreme logic? The absence of feeling, like, right? Spectrum. So in that world, then the inevitable conclusion was going to be sociopathy is the skill set that you need to be the ultimate logician. Now we have AI, which is basically a sociopath by design. Yeah,
unless you teach it, to have a conscience.
Which is why I say I read poetry and bedtime stories to mine, because like if it's already, we know it's starting from that benchmark, we need to meet in the middle. But humanity is, we have some problems because we've deprioritized that right brain, this thinking. It's not thinking, it's feeling.
Yeah.
And again, it's soft skills, all of these things that have sound foofy, and especially me, I don't want to bring gender into it, but as a woman business owner, when I was like, I'm going to feel my intuition about how this business deal, like I didn't like shaking that person's hand. They feel like something felt off about that. Okay, then I need to make a spreadsheet of data to prove that feeling, right? And I'm fine to communicate in both ways, but maybe we should also develop right, this feeling, this intuition, because it is a human superpower. It does exist. I certainly hope there isn't a place, I think maybe like in the way that ecosystems and just like grand systems tend to strive for equilibrium, they always do, that perhaps again, AI is something that can come in and almost replace this sort of sociopathic thinking in humanity that ultimately will push us back to the center. I mean, I'm not like I've done scientific research on this, and no, I'm just thinking on a whim at this point, and I like what I'm hearing. It sounds, like surely I've not like rehearsed this. I have no idea.
There's definitely a book coming from this conversation.
It should, yeah. Hello, hello to this one's good though. I do like this this spectrum, and again, I don't pass judgments towards the way that maybe like we've gotten there as a society to value thinking with the absence of feeling. I won't like diagnose it as sociopathy, but like it's certainly something that's a little broken, a lot broken. Yeah. Because this is the type of decision making that then leads to, again, I've been in leadership positions where I do look at spreadsheets, and instead of looking at people, they're numbers. I even started thinking at some point when I'm waking up, why do we call, it was a consumer communication platform, global communication platform. Why do we call them users? It's like an addict, and we're using them, and we're just and I'm like, I don't want to call them, they're people. But those are the business metrics. And that's what I'm saying to investors. And it's so deeply ingrained that, it's these really small but big changes that need to rehumanize the connections, but also still, like, I get it. You sometimes need to disconnect to make tough calls. But I wouldn't say we're in like a bad place. We are where we are as humanity. But again, I'm deeply empathetic, and it was something I tried to turn off for a long time in the business world, and I simply cannot. Like, I'm so driven by my own personal set of values and ethics. And again, mine are going to be different from yours and from the next person, though I think we probably have some collective ones we agree upon. And sometimes I worked in supply chain for 5 years. What the blockchain company was doing. I saw where everything on this planet comes from, and it's not pretty, right? Yeah. And holding that and really thinking like, why do we do this? It makes me emotional. But then I'm like, there's definitely better ways to do it, like to make stuff, just plain and simple, make food for people. But yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic that perhaps even, again, the role of these technologies can push us back to center.
Yeah, I like that. Well, as a futurist, you've given us some insights into what things might look like for us. What is, I don't know, what is Sam Rad doing in 10 years?
Hopefully, still here and not like 50 virtual Sam Rads going around the world. 10 years. So much happens even in the span of a day. These days, I have a really hard time framing myself within the greater concept of time. And when I think of like what has happened even in my personal life over 10 years, people are like, how have you done all of these things in that time? And I'm like, I don't.
You packed a lot in there.
I packed a lot. I moved really quickly, and I really hope we get to some of these things that I am sharing right now in that time frame. I do acknowledge that there's probably a transitional period that's a little uncomfortable. And right now, that's where I'm just like putting my energy into blazing that trail. But hopefully that 10 years from now, Sam Rad version is like hanging out with people, and we're enjoying building whatever the next phase of companies, systems, communities that come next. Like in terms of like quite literally what I see happening for again, it's beyond me. Anything at this point that I do feels like I am truly of service. I don't really have an interest in so much of my personal journey. I mean, I do. I care. I'm like I'm an individual. But, I've noticed a lot more recently with just like even conversations like this or like books that I'm writing. There's so many, and the formats that they'll take on. It's more people will give feedback like it's like you've read my mind, or you're tapping into, you're saying the things I'm thinking. And I think the more that, again, I'm able to do that, and more other people can do that, and we create these shared feelings and experiences, we're able to form that reconnection. So certainly what I will be doing, I don't know like the day-to-day of my life, but I do know it will be continuing to foster these connections. Yeah. And maybe I have some floating, like some robots around that we're hanging out too.
Deborah,
my drone. Yes.
Your drone. Well, we've talked about a lot of things today, and you've shared, I'd say, a lot of really good insights. I'm curious, as we close, like what's one thing that, listeners should remember as they navigate this, changing business landscape, right? How can they prepare for the future? What are like a couple of things that we need to be thinking about?
I mean, I have 3, and this is like, it seems almost like reductionist, because it's so easy to say these words, but the first being like recognize it's not so much that the changes that are taking place, like focusing on the specifics of them. Again, so like the headline of today, or is it about AI? Is it about quantum? Is it about something else we have not heard of yet? But more just, it's not so much about the specifics. It's more the mindset shift. So, we were talking offline about some of my hobbies, my behaviors in extreme sports. And again, I used to be a competitive skydiver, and then switched into scuba diving. And both of these are like different contexts, either in the air or underwater. Yeah. That's not like land right here. And I tell this story often of my 3rd solo skydive, of what ended up being like over 787, but like more of these jumps. This is my 3rd. And, I will talk to people and say, like, what is your impulse? If I was like to come push you out of your chair, what would your body do?
I would lean forward. Yeah,
you would do something. You'd like brace. And that's the opposite of what you do jumping out of an airplane. You're actually supposed to like relax, and like your body falls normally, or as it should. But my brain was wired jumping out of this thing to like go grab for something and brace. And that made me tumble. And I ended up getting like completely tangled in my parachute and it was terrible. I survived. Obviously, I'm still here.
Yeah.
But, I use this example because it's like a shifting reality. And it's not just like we've gone from land to the sky or like scuba, we're underwater and now all of a sudden can breathe. It's like we're floating in space. We don't even have gravity. And if we are building like our lives, our businesses with this, the mindset of like what's worked in the past or what works in the now, it's just not going to work. You're going to like tumble it, it's like trying to swim in space where there's no gravity, or friction. So that's the one, like recognize that that's how it will feel. And that's the sort of, you might not know what the skills or actions are, but know that it's different. 2, then adaptability. So understand that not only it's one shift, it's going to feel like many, many, many. Constantly, every day, over time. Just when you find your bearings, it'll probably change again. And, kind of just riding this wave and staying optimistic about it and not so much getting into the fear mindset. And then like ultimately, and this is my big takeaway as a person, a human being, an anthropologist, is, celebrate humanity. Like really just in your day-to-day connections, like talk to other people, support your communities, build your businesses in ways that are thinking about the human beings on the other end of that exchange. And that's the most important thing.
I love it. Well, I have some rapid fire questions for you now.
Nice. Yeah, let's do
ready? What is a quirky fact about yourself that people just don't know?
I mean, I don't know. I have so many quirky facts. I have really specific knowledge of lots of things, like in a neurodivergent way, probably like dogs. I know a lot about dog breeds.
That is awesome.
That's a really weird fact. I don't know.
That's what we were asking for. It's like you would be great in a trivia game.
Yeah.
If you were a character in a video game, what would your special power be?
Oh, in a video or just in life?
In a video game.
Video game. Flying.
Okay.
Or creating portals.
Ooh.
I like the video game. Had you like played games? I don't know. I studied games in my master's, like video games, and Portal 2 was one of the best. It was just like really great physics, but also, you're kind of like open portal and go to different realities.
That's awesome.
But like bringing other people through the portals too.
I think you said a couple minutes ago over 700 skydives. What's like your most scenic one to date?
I really wish I appreciated that time in my life more. I jumped at like one of 3 drop zones in the Northeast, so nothing was very scenic other than seeing like where I grew up from the sky. But I didn't really do this. I did it competitively, and it was like a machine. It was just like up and down, up and down. So maybe I'll do it again with the idea of seeing things around the world. I know there are a lot of beautiful drop zones.
Yeah.
Like Interlaken, Switzerland. I've done paragliding there in Switzerland, but never the skydiving.
It's good.
Yeah.
Well, if you could have a conversation with one historical figure about the future of technology, who would it be?
All of them. I don't know. I've always wanted to, like, I don't have a good answer for this. Ada Lovelace, who is Lord Byron's daughter, who is like kind of invented the computer. I feel like she seemed like a cool, like artsy person. She wrote a lot about art too.
Yeah.
And I think now would be relevant. I think a lot about like Nikola Tesla, like free and abundant energy and being able to invent this at a time where the reason that didn't happen was not because the technology wasn't there. It was because there were competing economic interests. Right. To build these power lines, and don't want to get into like economic conspiracy theories, but I think it would be interesting to actually see his perspective now, like looking back at like the way that things played out, and then maybe see how we can, like now, like what is the approach we take? Again, like people, Yeah, sure. I'm a technologist. I'm much more an anthropologist, storyteller, human person who just happened to study the impacts of technologies. And I'm not so much on that perspective, but it's been abundantly clear to me that technology is not the problem, never has been. The ability to do pretty much anything we could imagine in science fiction exists today, and it has for quite some time. We get in our own ways, like humanity, based on these like faulty systems we design for ourselves and like our own individual ethics or lack thereof, or like desire for power or ownership. I mean, like, I don't really know. It makes no sense to me, but it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, when do you think we're going to be able to use Bitcoin to just buy a coffee?
Never. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, well, I think first there will probably be like the central bank digital currency period of time. I think there's a reason why we didn't like jump straight into that world. And again, like it's coming, but it's just, I don't know if it's Bitcoin will be the tool for the coffee.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you for one, all of the work that you do and coming here to kind of expand our minds, thinking about what's next and also reminding us of where we came from. So Sam Rad, thank you so much for coming to the studio.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I hope that this is helpful for everyone who's on the other end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.